So, I've been thinking today about my role in the world generally, our role in the world generally. And about our responsibility to the people around us. And this sort of started, just to give you some background, because obviously we have an election coming up, and the kids in my class are learning about, being a responsible, being a responsible citizen. They're learning about, how the election process works, and they're learning about things like bipartisanship and bias and things like that, and like elections and volunteering and polling places and things like that. So that's been stewing in my head today, and also my personal responsibility as a voter. And something else, which is that I recently got this job that's sort of related to the arts, and it specifically relates to an interview question that I answered. And then the third thing is that I just watched this very short documentary about climbing. And the beginning of another documentary. And because this thought had already been in my head for a while now, I just wanted to sort of put it out there and think about it more instead of leaving it be and not sort of addressing it in my own head. So for more context, I would say my family is quite normal in the sense that often, I was about to generalize. I shouldn't generalize. So my family, the way we grew up is, my family cares a lot about what goes on within the family. We don't really live close to any extended family, so it's basically just us. And when you only have like the nuclear family system with no like outside support, and also growing up, I wouldn't say that some parents interact a lot with other parents, and kids interact with other parents' kids, so that there's becomes sort of a web of like connection and support through like many different families. I wouldn't say it was like that, for me at least. And so, growing up, I think I was pretty heavily influenced by this very, not influenced, but I noticed this very individual mindset around the responsibility of an individual, in that someone's most important responsibility is to the immediate people around them. Which is, okay, it is a way to look at the world for sure. And it's a way that is very common. And because you have only a certain amount of bandwidth of like emotional processing and empathy and things like that, you can really dedicate a lot of your energy to, like, for example, parents, their kids, you know. And then I went to a high school that was very focused on becoming a person who served the community, was an active part in not just the lives of the people directly around them, but who thought that, in a sense, like the world was the community that we needed to serve. Not just our family, not just our parents or friends or, I don't know, just everyone. Specifically people who are like underserved and oppressed. And so these two things clash in my head a lot. Firstly, because I am only human, like everyone else, and I also have, you know, a limited bandwidth. And sometimes love for someone else can cost you being able to love others, or your desire, or your desire to protect someone, or your desire to care for someone can come, you may have to sacrifice your ability to care for and protect others. Or maybe even your desire to protect others causes you to not even care about the people around you, the other people around you. And then when it comes to things like climbing and art, these are more niche communities. I would say less so now, especially because of like the internet. Like sports like climbing are getting very popular. The arts is getting more popular. For example, like when I was in middle school, like there were very few people who read outside of school, but now a lot of people read because of the internet. So things that are more niche, not to say that reading was ever a niche thing, but just like people who intentionally went out of their way to pursue something like that, is more niche. And now these places, these niche places, now that they're being opened up, you sort of you begin to see them stray away from the original ethos of these groups. And what I mean is that, personally I feel, and you feel free to disagree with me on this, but niche groups often are meant to protect that niche. Like people who are obsessed with climbing, often it can be weird, or people are obsessed with art, or vintage cameras, or like carving wooden like sculptures, or like sewing your own clothes. A lot of people will say, oh yeah, I love that, that's great, but often these people are looking for a community where they feel like they belong, and often, and I feel personally that even though some people may say, yeah, I like this thing that you're doing, they may not feel, just by your approval, that they belong in whatever circle you are a part of. You know? And so people look for spaces that protect their niche and that are made up of people who are similar to them in their interests and understand the potential like intricacies of that interest that may not exist in the minds of other people. And especially for things like art, art can be a way to outpour the feelings that you have that you can't share anywhere else. And because these spaces are opening up as if like this thing that so many people value deeply is now a new trend, a new aesthetic, the new thing. Now, the people who come into these communities may not understand the activity beyond the activity itself. I know it may seem weird. It may seem weird for someone who got into climbing to say, what do you mean? Climbing is just climbing. A bunch of people climb. That's it. Someone who even has been climbing for a long time, who just says like, oh yeah, the goal is just, you climb better and better and bigger grades, harder routes. That's it. That's all climbing is. To me, like, of course I've made some friends in climbing, and I have lots of good friends who climb with me. And, we just go into the gym and we do our climbs. We climb, I'm projecting V9, and I hope to get to V10 next month, But I feel like, at least in the glimpses that I've seen, whether it be through the experiences of people that I know, or whether it be through the experience of people that I don't know, who I watched through like these documentaries or online, or heard people speak about these things, it just feels like there is more than just this simple experience. Not simple, but this experience that is so common among, I guess, the new people who come into the sport. And I am one of those new people. And so I struggle with how to respect this new space that I'm in, and how to be a part of it without being someone who is simply co-opting the original purpose of the space for my own needs. And maybe you might have to, it may feel like exclusion to some people. In the same way that maybe the individuals around you might not understand why you're doing something and why you've put an unnamed, unfamiliar group as of more importance than them. Like, why do you care about these people? I mean, we're your friends. We're right here. I struggle with that. I don't know if this made any sense, but it did to me, and that's all that matters. Another thing is that sometimes I see glimpses of a place, a community that I want to belong in. And yet I find myself that because of this philosophy that I've just said, of the protection of spaces, I feel like I, as an individual, inherently cannot be a part of these spaces, whether it be because of my privilege, because of the way that I look at the world, because of who I am. I can never be a part of that group. And then I think about, but what if I could? And then that leads me into the thought process of, but if I become a part of that group, will I ever be one of them? Will I ever be fully accepted by them? Or even if I do become accepted by them, is there something that I am that does not inherently belong? Is there something separating us that can never be crossed, essentially? And I'm being very vague here, but let's say you learn, I don't know, Portuguese. You learn it perfectly. you're fluent. And you learned it from Duolingo. You can speak Portuguese fluently. You can have someone read off of a book in Portuguese to you, and you can translate it perfectly back. But there will always be something missing there in your understanding of the language. You may be able to translate it perfectly, maybe even be able to put your own spin on it, but will you be able to translate it, or will you be able to understand it perfectly in the way that someone who has been speaking Portuguese since the day they were born, will you be able to understand it? Or will you forever be simply translating it into the language you know? When you go to Portugal, will you fit in? Or will you be accepted as a Portuguese person? Will people be able to tell just by a slight accent that you're not from Portugal? It's kind of like that. The feeling that no matter how much you appreciate and love Portugal, no matter how much of an expert you become at Portuguese culture, no matter how deep you go into learning the language, that you can just never be Portuguese. It's like essentially that. And whether because of that barrier, is it an insult to even attempt to learn Portuguese in the first place? Was it wrong of you to desire to become Portuguese because you knew from the start that there was something different about you that you could never change, and yet you pushed against it? And now let's say you are a Portuguese person. Let's say you see this person who loves your country, who has mastered your language. Someone who, by all accounts, should be Portuguese. But you wonder, does he really understand what it means? Whether there is something that it means to be Portuguese? Will you ever accept this person as someone who is Portuguese? Or will you only think of him as, oh, that's that guy who is really good at speaking Portuguese? Or, oh, that guy acts just like a real Portuguese person? Or, yeah, that guy definitely knows more about Portugal than I do. How would you treat that person? Do you think the other person could tell that you were treating them that way? How do you think they would feel? One more little anecdote before I turn off the camera. I was climbing at the climbing gym a couple days ago, and one of the people I know was doing this big dyno. A big paddle dyno, and he kept getting closer and closer to it, and every time I would just give out a huge you know, when one of your friends is so close to doing something, especially a climb, and he barely gets it, but he's so close. You have to that huge sigh of that shows support and encouragement and you got this next time for sure type energy. And I just remember, I don't know what they meant by it, but I wasn't really looking, but someone gave was just looking up, I think, yeah, they were looking at us, the few people who were looking at this guy doing the climb, and just maybe not mocking, but they just said that aw, as well, not not loudly, but just almost mocking or sarcastic or something like that, or maybe just an involuntary exclamation. And I also thought about how it's almost you can't care too much about something, otherwise other people will be like, why do you care so much? It's just climbing, it's just art. Why do you care about this? Why do you care about that? It's not a big deal. Why can't I be a part of this? Why are you a part of this? I mean, just so many questions that I can't answer, that I've tried to answer here for myself, and that I failed to do. But yeah. Class starts soon for me, in a few days, and it's the weekend, so it's my 2 off days before, work and school. I am really grateful though that I got this new job. So now I've got 2 jobs. Hopefully, if once I confirm actually get hours, and then I'll say that I have 2 jobs. But for now, I've got 1 job and 1 big job prospect. School's coming up. That's coming up. I'm very tired, but my sleep schedule's getting better, even though I feel a lot more tired in the morning. I don't know, every time something good happens, it feels like my brain just tries to turn it back on me and find something to, look at and point at and think about how it could be better. But I think for now, I'll just try and focus on being thankful that I have a good night's sleep ahead of me, because nothing tomorrow morning, and that I got this job, and that my mom liked her birthday present. Best of luck on whatever you guys are, whatever you guys got going